Every month, something happens inside the human body that connects women living today with women who lived thousands of years ago. A process that has existed for all of human history. But for most of that time, there were no supermarkets, no disposable pads, no tampons, no modern medicine explaining what was happening. So how did ancient women handle something they could not avoid? And before you think this is just an uncomfortable topic, remember this. Half of humanity has experienced menstruation throughout history. Every ancient civilization had to understand it. Every generation of women had to find their own solutions. From Egyptian women along the Nile, to Roman women inside powerful cities, to Chinese, Indian, and indigenous societies around the world. Humans created different ways to live with the same biological reality. But the answers are stranger than most people imagine, because the history of periods is not only about hygiene. It is about survival, culture, science, and how humans solve problems when modern technology does not exist. In this video, we will uncover 4 mysteries. First, what did ancient women actually use during their periods? Second, why did different civilizations create completely different beliefs about menstruation? Third, how did women manage daily life while dealing with something unavoidable? And finally, why did modern period products take thousands of years to appear? Because sometimes the hidden stories of ordinary life reveal the most fascinating parts of human history. When people study ancient history, they usually focus on powerful people, kings, wars, empires, great inventions. But behind every civilization were millions of ordinary people solving everyday problems. How they found food, how they stayed warm, how they cared for children, and how they managed their own bodies. One of the most universal human experiences was menstruation, yet it is also one of the least recorded parts of history. Not because it was unimportant, but because most historical records were written by people who focused on politics, religion, and warfare. The daily experiences of ordinary women were often ignored. This creates a fascinating mystery. Women thousands of years ago faced the same biological process that exists today, but they lived in a world without modern products or modern explanations. They had to use the materials available around them. They had to follow the beliefs of their societies, and they had to continue living their daily lives. But the solutions were not the same everywhere. A woman living in ancient Egypt did not experience menstruation the same way as a woman living in ancient Rome. A woman in ancient China did not follow the same traditions as a woman in Mesoamerica. Different environments created different answers, and some of those answers reveal surprising things about how humans understood the body. The first mystery is the most obvious one. Before modern pads existed, what did women use? The answer is not one simple invention. Ancient women did not have a universal solution. They adapted. They used what their environment provided. One of the oldest clues comes from ancient Egypt. The Ebers Papyrus, written around 1550 BCE, is one of the oldest medical documents ever discovered. It contains hundreds of treatments and observations about the human body. It shows that Egyptians were deeply interested in medicine and women's health. They used materials like linen and plant fibers because these resources were common in Egyptian life. Linen was especially important because flax plants were cultivated widely along the Nile. The same material used for clothing and household textiles could also become part of managing the body. Think about that.
Thousands of years before pharmacies existed, people were already looking at ordinary materials and asking, how can this help us? But Egypt was only one example. Across the world, women developed different methods. In ancient China, historical records describe the use of reusable cloth materials. Some traditional practices involved folded fabrics made from available textiles, including silk or cotton, depending on the period and social status. The exact details are difficult to reconstruct because private daily practices were rarely recorded, but the materials reveal what was possible. In Mesoamerica, some indigenous societies used natural fibers available in their environment. The Aztec civilization, for example, had access to materials like maguey fibers from the agave plant. Different landscapes created different solutions. The desert, the forest, the farmland, the city. Every environment shaped how people lived, and this revealed something important. Ancient women were not waiting for modern inventions, they were constantly adapting. But materials were only part of the story, because the way societies understood menstruation was just as important as what they used, and sometimes those beliefs changed everything.
The second mystery is not about what women used, it is about what people believed. Because menstruation was not only a biological event, it was also something societies tried to explain. And when humans do not fully understand something, they create stories. Sometimes those stories are respectful, sometimes they are fearful, sometimes they are completely wrong. Ancient Greece gives us one example. Greek physicians were among the first people to study the human body systematically. The writings collected in the Hippocratic corpus, created between roughly the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, contain medical theories about women's health. But ancient Greek medicine was built on ideas that were very different from modern science. Many doctors believed the body was controlled by balances of fluids and substances. They did not understand hormones, genetics, or reproductive biology. So menstruation was explained through the medical knowledge available at the time. The Roman world developed its own beliefs. The writer Pliny the Elder, who lived from 23 to 79 CE, created one of the largest collections of ancient knowledge in his work Natural History. But some of his descriptions of menstruation show how misunderstood the process was. He repeated beliefs that menstrual blood had unusual powers. Some Romans believed it could affect plants, animals, or objects. Today, those ideas sound strange, but they reveal something very human. People were trying to understand a powerful biological event they experienced but could not scientifically explain. Think about that. The body remained the same. The experience remained the same, but the explanation changed depending on the culture. And this happened around the world. In ancient India, ideas about menstruation became connected with religious and social traditions. Texts such as the Laws of Manu, compiled around the 1st centuries BCE and CE, contained rules about purity and social behavior. Some interpretations created restrictions around menstruating women. These ideas were not based on modern biology. They reflected the beliefs and social structures of that historical period. In ancient Jewish tradition, menstrual laws also became part of religious practice. The Book of Leviticus, written in the 1st millennium BCE, describes concepts of ritual purity connected to menstruation. Again, this was not a medical explanation. It was a cultural and religious framework for understanding the body. But not every society viewed menstruation only through restriction. Some cultures saw it through ideas of power and spirituality.
Among some indigenous communities, menstruation was connected with ideas of transformation, womanhood, and connection to nature. The details varied greatly between different groups, but the pattern was clear. Every society had to answer the same question: what does this biological event mean? And every society created its own answer. Some answers came from medicine, some from religion, some from tradition. But behind all of them was the same human reality. Women were experiencing the same biology, but they lived inside completely different worlds. But beliefs were only one challenge, because regardless of what society believed, women still had to wake up every day. They had work to do, families to care for, and lives to continue. Which leads to the third mystery.
Imagine living thousands of years ago. There are no stores selling hygiene products, no online information, no modern medicine explaining every symptom. But life does not stop. There is food to prepare, children to raise, animals to care for, fields to work, families depending on you. For most of human history, menstruation was something women had to manage while continuing normal life, not something that allowed people to pause everything. And this required adaptation. A woman living in an ancient city with access to expensive textiles had different options than someone living in a small farming community. Social status mattered. Environment mattered. Available resources mattered. In ancient Rome, for example, linen and wool were common materials. Roman households used textiles for clothing, bedding, and many daily needs. Because fabric was available, reusable cloth solutions were possible. But we should be careful. The historical record does not give us a perfect picture of what every Roman woman did. Private experiences were rarely written down. Most ancient texts were created by educated men discussing medicine, law, or philosophy, not by ordinary women describing their daily routines. And that creates one of the biggest challenges in studying ancient life. The people who experienced something the most often left behind the fewest records. But archaeology helps fill the gaps. Objects, materials, clothing, household tools. They show us how people lived, and they reveal something fascinating. Ancient women were not passive. They were problem solvers. The same creativity humans used to create shelter, tools, and farming methods was also used to solve private, everyday challenges. Think about a woman thousands of years ago. She did not have access to modern products, but she understood her environment. She knew which materials were useful. She knew how to clean and reuse objects. She knew how to adapt. That ability is one of the reasons humans survived, not because we always had the best technology, but because we were constantly finding solutions. But then, something surprising happened. The modern world eventually created products that transformed this experience. And the story behind that invention is stranger than many people realize, because the first modern attempts did not immediately succeed.
The surprising truth is that modern period products are extremely new. For thousands of years, women relied on local materials and reusable solutions. Then the industrial world began changing everyday life. New factories, new materials, new ways of producing household products. But even when technology created a solution, society still had another problem. People had to be willing to talk about it. In 1888, one of the first commercial disposable menstrual products appeared. It was called Lister's towels. The product was created by the company that later became part of the Johnson & Johnson story. But it failed. Not because the technology was useless. The problem was social. Many women felt uncomfortable buying a product connected to menstruation from a male pharmacist. The embarrassment surrounding the topic prevented many people from purchasing it. Think about how interesting that is. The problem was not only creating the invention, the problem was creating a society where people felt comfortable using it. Then came World War I. During the war, nurses noticed that a highly absorbent material called cellucotton could absorb fluids effectively. This material was created by the Kimberly-Clark Company. After seeing its potential, the company adapted the material from menstrual products. In 1921, Kimberly-Clark introduced Kotex. This changed menstruation for many women. For the first time, a widely available disposable product allowed women to replace homemade solutions with something manufactured. But remember how recent this is. Humans have existed for hundreds of thousands of years. Ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, ancient China. All of these civilizations existed long before modern period products. The technology many women use today represents only a tiny moment in the entire human story. And that reveals something important. Human progress is not only about creating powerful machines. Sometimes, progress is about solving ordinary problems that millions of people experience every day.
Every month, women today experience something that connects them directly to women who lived thousands of years ago. The world changed. The technology changed. The explanations changed. But the human experience remained. Ancient women did not have modern stores. They did not have disposable products. They did not have today's scientific understanding. But they adapted. They used the materials around them. They created solutions. They continued living their lives. And maybe the most surprising lesson is this. The history of humanity is not only written in pyramids, wars, and inventions. It is also written in the small problems ordinary people solved every day. Because before humans created advanced technology, they first learned how to survive with what they had. What ancient daily problem would shock you the most? Share it in the comments. Because behind every civilization, every invention, and every chapter of human history, there are millions of ordinary people finding ways to live.